The words came through the wall like ghosts, thin and venomous, and they found me in the hallway of the life I thought was mine. I can't stand him anymore. Every breath he takes irritates me to my core. My wife's words, Clara's. They didn't just break my heart, they atomized it, scattering the pieces into a past that suddenly felt like a forgery. Until that moment, I was Silas Holloway, a man who, at 34, believed he understood the architecture of love. I thought it was a structure you built with calloused hands and a steady heart, brick by patient brick, over years of shared sunrises and silent promises. For 8 years, I had been the diligent mason of my marriage. I had come home later than usual that Tuesday, the exhaustion of a long day at the firm clinging to me like a damp coat. But the scent of our apartment's sandalwood and cinnamon, from the expensive candles Clara always burned, was supposed to be the antidote. It was the scent of home, of her. She was my compass, my safe harbor. I pictured her delicate features, those piercing hazel eyes that once held a universe of desire meant only for me, and the infectious laugh that could make me feel like the only man on earth. I had built my entire existence around the gravity of her presence, convinced we were an unbreakable team. I kicked off my shoes by the door, the soft wool of the rug, a familiar comfort. As I loosened my necktie, I was about to call out her name when I heard her voice drifting from the living room. At first, I assumed she was on the phone with her sister Jess. The tone was casual, tinged with that familiar, mild exasperation they reserve for each other. Then I heard my name, and the world tilted on its axis. "Silas just doesn't get it," she said, her voice clearer now as I froze, my hand hovering over the knot of my tie. I was a statue in the dim hallway, an unwilling eavesdropper in my own home. "I can't stand him anymore." The words were spoken without anger, without the heat of a momentary fight. They were spoken with the cold, dead weight of a truth held back for too long. My blood ran cold, a glacial tide pulling all the warmth from my veins. "Every little thing he does annoys me," she continued, and I could almost see her, curled on our gray sectional, phone pressed to her ear. "The way he breathes too loudly when he sleeps. How he chews with his mouth slightly open, even though I pointed it out 1,000 times. How predictable he is. Same routines, same jokes, same everything. I feel like I'm suffocating in a box of beige paint." Beige paint. Our life, my love. My unwavering devotion reduced to a dull, suffocating swatch of beige. Each word was a physical blow, landing with a sickening thud in the hollow of my chest. My heart pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat trying to drown out the poison seeping into me. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that this was some cruel joke or a scene from a movie I'd stumbled into. But there was no mistaking the raw frustration in her voice, the profound exhaustion that comes from carrying a secret that has become too heavy to bear. I should have stormed into the room. I should have confronted her, demanded she look me in the eye and repeat what she just said. I should have done anything other than what I did, which was to stand there, frozen in the hallway's shadow, gripping the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white, as if the solid wood could somehow keep my world from falling apart. Then her voice lowered, a conspiratorial whisper that held more devastation than any shout. And what she said next shattered what little remained of me. "I haven't loved him in years, Jess. I don't know how to leave. He's comfortable, reliable. But I don't want reliable anymore. I want to feel alive again." My chest constricted so tightly I forgot how to breathe. The air in the hallway became thick, unbreathable, comfortable, reliable. I was a well-worn armchair, a sturdy pair of shoes she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The love of my life, the woman I had devoted nearly a decade to, saw me as nothing more than a burden, a cage of beige paint she was desperate to escape. I don't know how long I stood there, drowning in the weight of those words, the scent of sandalwood and cinnamon suddenly cloying and foul. The foundation of my life hadn't just cracked. It had been a mirage all along. There are moments that bifurcate your life into a before and an after. Standing in that hallway, I knew I had just stumbled across my own stark dividing line. Part of me, the part that still belonged to the before, wanted to burst into the living room and demand answers, to make her see the agony she had just inflicted without even knowing I was there to receive the blows. Another part of me, the nascent creature of the after, wanted to simply disappear, to rewind the last 8 years and pretend I had never heard any of it, never met her, never built a life on a foundation of lies. But what I did next surprised even me. It wasn't born of anger or a desire for revenge. It was born of a profound, chilling numbness, a self-preservation instinct I didn't know I possessed. I turned around, my movements stiff and silent. I walked to our bedroom. Our bedroom, a phrase that now tasted like ash in my mouth, and pulled a duffel bag from the top of the closet. My hands trembled as I began stuffing clothes inside, my mind blessedly blank, my body moving on a grim autopilot. A few shirts, socks, a pair of jeans, enough for a few days, maybe a week. I was packing for a destination I couldn't name, fleeing a home that no longer existed. As I zipped up the bag, my gaze fell upon our wedding photo on the dresser. It was a perfect day, captured in a silver frame. Clara was radiant, her arms wrapped around my neck, her hazel eyes seemingly full of a love so deep it promised forever. I was grinning, a fool blissfully unaware that the promise had an expiration date he couldn't see. I stared at that photo, at the smiling man who had no idea his world was a carefully constructed fiction, and I felt like the biggest fool on the planet. Had it all been a lie? Had she been playing a part this entire time, waiting for an excuse to leave? I clenched my jaw and tore my gaze away from the happy ghost in the frame. Walking back down the hallway was the longest journey of my life. Each step was heavy, deliberate. As I approached the living room, I heard her laugh at something Jess must have said on the phone. It was a light, careless sound. The sound of a woman who hadn't just ripped my heart out of my chest and stomped on it with her designer boots. That sound, more than anything else, solidified my resolve. I stood there for a second, gripping the duffel bag, my knuckles white again. Then, I stepped into the light of the living room. She was sitting on our gray sectional, phone still pressed to her ear, smiling. That smile died the instant she saw me standing there, bag in hand, my face a mask of stone. Silas. She blinked, her expression shifting from lazy contentment to sharp confusion. She said something quiet into the phone and ended the call. "What are you doing? Where are you going with that?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, a thick, suffocating blanket. I watched her shift uncomfortably under my gaze, the confusion on her face slowly melting into a dawning unease. I wanted to see it. I wanted to witness that exact moment when she realized I had heard everything. The moment the carefully constructed wall she had built around her double life came crumbling down. It was a flicker in her hazel eyes, a sudden intake of breath, a paling of her cheeks. She knew. And then I said the only thing that felt right, the only thing that felt true in that hurricane of lies. My voice was quiet, devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The shock had rendered her speechless. I didn't wait for her to find her voice, to weave a new tapestry of excuses. I turned on my heel, walked to the front door, and left. The click of the latch behind me was the most final sound I had ever heard. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what came next. All I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, was that I was done being someone's comfortable, reliable option. I was done being beige. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. My mind was a blizzard of white noise, my heartbeat a frantic pounding in my ears. I didn't have a destination, only the primal need for motion, for distance. I climbed into my car, the familiar scent of leather and coffee, doing nothing to ground me. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached, a deep, shaky breath leaving my lips, but failing to steady the tremor in my soul. Clara's words replayed over and over in my mind, a cruel, relentless echo. "I haven't loved him in years. I don't know how to leave." I should have been angry. I should have been furious, consumed by a righteous rage. But all I felt was an unbearable hollowness, the kind of soul-deep emptiness that settles in your bones and makes you question the very fabric of your reality. 8 years, wiped clean. I had spent 8 years of my life loving a woman who saw me as nothing more than a convenient placeholder, a piece of furniture in the life she was too afraid to leave. And the worst part, the part that twisted the knife, was that I hadn't seen it coming. Not a single crack in the facade. I stared at the road ahead, my vision blurring. I couldn't go to a friend's house. Most of our friends were mutual, and the last thing I wanted was to stammer through an explanation for why I was on their doorstep in the middle of the night with a duffel bag and a shattered life. My parents lived states away. A hotel? That would only make this more real. A transaction that confirmed my new status as a man without a home. I wasn't ready for that yet. So, I drove. The city's arteries were empty at this hour, streetlights casting long, ghostly shadows over the pavement. My hands tightened around the wheel as I replayed every moment of my marriage, desperately searching for the cracks I had been too blind to see. The way Clara had slowly stopped reaching for my hand in the car. The way she would sigh, a quiet puff of air, when I talked about my day. The way she had started spending more time on her phone, smiling at texts I wasn't privy to. I had explained it all away. She was tired. She was stressed. I was a fool. Eventually, I found myself pulling into an empty parking lot near the harbor. The salt-tinged air thick and heavy. My chest was heaving with the weight of my thoughts. In the distance, the waves crashed against the shore. A steady, rhythmic sound that was an unsettling contrast to the chaos inside me. I turned off the engine, the sudden silence deafening, and rested my forehead against the cool plastic of the steering wheel. For the first time since hearing those words, I let myself feel it all. Not just the hollowness, but the sharp, stabbing betrayal, the heartbreak. And beneath it all, the scalding humiliation of knowing my wife, my partner, had been pretending for years. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the hard lump in my throat, refusing to cry. I wanted to believe this was salvageable, that maybe this was just a fleeting frustration on her part, words spoken in a moment of weakness. But those words weren't spoken in anger. They were spoken in truth, a truth she had confessed to her sister, not to me. I had already lost her. I just hadn't realized it until now. A sudden vibration jolted me out of my stupor. My phone, lying on the passenger seat, was lighting up the darkness. Clara. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, at her name glowing in the dark. A part of me screamed not to answer, to throw the phone into the harbor and drive until I ran out of gas. But against my better judgment, I answered, holding the phone to my ear without a word. Silas? Her voice was hesitant, unsure. A stark contrast to the careless confidence I'd heard earlier. Where are you? I didn't respond. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. She exhaled, a shaky sound. Look, I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard you, I said quietly. My voice was steady, a betrayal of the storm raging inside me. A pause, then softer from her end. What? I heard you, Clara, I repeated, the words tasting like metal. I was in the hallway. I heard everything. The silence on the other end was absolute, deafening. I could hear her breath hitch. Silas, I didn't mean... Don't lie to me, I cut in, my voice sharp for the first time. Not anymore. Another silence. Then finally, a small, broken question. Where are you? I could have told her. I could have given her the chance to fix this, to spin some excuse or beg for forgiveness. I could have opened the door for more lies, more pretense. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to give her the power to hurt me again. So, I hung up. I tossed the phone onto the seat and stared out at the dark ocean, stretching endlessly in front of me. And for the first time in 8 years, I let myself accept the devastating, liberating truth. I had spent almost a decade loving a woman who didn't love me back, and I wasn't going to waste another second of my life doing it. Sleep never came. I spent the night in my car, a sentinel watching over the wreckage of my life as the tide ebbed and flowed. At some point, I checked my phone again. 7 missed calls from Clara, 3 texts. The first was short, "Where are you?" The second, more desperate, "Silas, come home. We need to talk." The third made my stomach turn. "You're being dramatic. Let's just be adults about this." Dramatic? A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips, the sound startling in the quiet car. I had just overheard my wife dismantle our entire marriage, confess she hadn't loved me in years, and I was the one being dramatic. She had reduced our life together to an inconvenience, a trap she was stuck in, and now she wanted to talk like it was some casual misunderstanding. As the first hints of gray light crept over the horizon, painting the dark water in shades of charcoal and silver, I finally started the car again. Exhaustion was a physical weight on my body, but my mind was running on adrenaline and heartbreak. I couldn't sit there forever. I didn't know what my next move was, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't going home. I drove until my stomach started growling, a primal reminder that the world kept moving even when mine had stopped. I pulled into the parking lot of a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place with a faded neon sign flickering open, the smell of grease and strong coffee wafting from inside. It was anonymous. It was perfect. I walked in and took a seat at the counter, my body feeling heavy and foreign. A waitress appeared, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a kind, knowing smile. She poured me a cup of coffee without asking, as if she could read the last 12 hours of my life just by looking at me. "Tough night?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. I let out a breathless laugh. "You could say that." She didn't pry, just nodded and slid a menu toward me before walking away. I appreciated the space, the unspoken understanding. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the menu without seeing a single word. The world around me felt distant, like a movie playing on a screen. The chatter of other customers, the clinking of silverware, it all felt so jarringly normal. I should have been home right now, waking up next to Clara. Instead, I was here, a ghost at a greasy spoon counter, trying to figure out how to piece my life back together when all the pieces were gone. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text from Clara. "Silas, please, at least let me explain." Explain what? That every "I love you" for the past few years had been a lie? That she had been waiting for the courage to leave but settled for letting me keep loving her like a fool? I gritted my teeth and shoved the phone back into my pocket. Just as the waitress returned to refill my cup, the door chimed behind me. I didn't turn to look. I kept my eyes fixed on my own hollow reflection in the window. Then I heard a voice I would recognize anywhere. "Silas." My stomach dropped. I turned slowly on the stool, my body already braced for impact, and there she was, Clara. She stood near the entrance, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her hair a little messy, her expression an unreadable mix of frustration and desperation. For a second, neither of us spoke. The diner felt suddenly too quiet, like the entire place was holding its breath. I exhaled slowly, my hand gripping my coffee cup a little tighter. "How did you find me?" She took a hesitant step forward. "You always drive when you're upset. I figured you'd end up somewhere quiet." She glanced around, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Didn't expect a diner, though." I didn't say anything. She sighed, shifting her weight. "You just disappeared, Silas. I woke up and you were gone." "I didn't disappear," I said evenly, my voice calm. "I walked away." She flinched. "Good." I gestured to the empty seat across from me in the booth behind the counter. "Since you're here, go ahead. Explain." "Oh." She hesitated, as if she hadn't expected me to actually listen. But after a moment, she slid into the booth. She looked nervous. That was new. "I didn't mean for you to hear that," she began, her voice low. "I was just venting." I scoffed, the sound sharp in the quiet diner. "Venting?" "Yes," she insisted, leaning forward slightly. "Silas, every couple has rough patches. Sometimes we say things we don't mean." I tilted my head, studying her. "How long has our rough patch been going on, Clara?" Her lips parted, but she hesitated. I nodded, the answer already clear. "You said you haven't loved me in years. That's not a rough patch. That's not something you say in a moment of frustration. That's the truth." Her eyes darted away, a flash of guilt confirming my words. "All this time," I continued, the numbness in my chest beginning to crack, letting the pain seep through. "You've just been waiting for what? For me to leave first? For a better offer to come along?" "No," she said quickly, her gaze snapping back to mine. I wasn't waiting. I just..." She rubbed her temples, exhaling sharply. "I didn't know how to bring it up." "You didn't know how to bring up the fact that you don't love me anymore?" My voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "So instead you let me keep trying. You let me keep believing we were building something together." "Oh," she winced. "I didn't mean for it to be like this." I let out another humorless laugh. "But it is." The waitress arrived then, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. Her eyes flickered to Clara for half a second before she walked away without a word. The tension was suffocating. Clara watched me pick up my fork. "So, what now?" I didn't answer right away. I took a slow, deliberate bite of my food, chewing thoughtfully, letting the silence stretch. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, resolved. "I don't know yet," I admitted, meeting her gaze. "But I'm not going to be your comfortable option anymore." Her face paled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I finally felt like I had taken back a sliver of control. I was no longer a passive character in her drama. I was the one deciding how this chapter ended. The moment I stepped out of the diner, the air felt different, lighter somehow, as if leaving Clara in that booth had lifted a physical weight from my shoulders. The sun was higher now, a warm presence on my skin, but I still felt cold inside, a deep, cellular chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. I walked to my car, gripping the door handle, but I didn't get in. Not yet. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the driver's side window. I barely recognized the man looking back at me. His eyes were tired, bloodshot. There was a dark stubble along his jaw that I hadn't bothered to shave. His shoulders were hunched, as if carrying something too heavy to bear. Was this what 8 years with Clara had turned me into? Someone so used to being overlooked that I didn't even notice when I was being tolerated instead of loved? A sudden noise behind me made me tense. Footsteps, then her voice, laced with a desperation that bordered on panic. "Silas, please don't just walk away." I shut my eyes for a second, gathering myself, before turning around. Clara stood just outside the diner's entrance, her arms crossed tightly, her carefully composed mask from the diner crumbling. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "Why are you making this so final? We can talk about this. We can figure it out." "Figure what out?" My voice was quiet, but it had a new weight to it. "How to pretend for another 5 years. How to make it easier for you to stay miserable." She flinched, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did," I said, exhaling sharply and running a hand through my disheveled hair. "You think this is just about what you said last night? This is about the years you spent looking at me like I was a piece of furniture. The years you let me believe something that wasn't real." Her head snapped up, eyes flashing with a spark of defensiveness. "And what about you? Do you really think you were the perfect husband? That I was the only one who was unhappy?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "Number. But at least I wasn't lying to you." The words hit her like a slap. Her jaw tightened, and for a second I thought she was going to argue, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. And just like that, she looked small. For so many years, she had been the sun my world orbited around. But right now, standing in this nowhere diner parking lot, I realized something that should have been obvious long ago. She wasn't my world. She was just a part of it, a part that no longer fit. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I glanced at my car, then back at her. "Now, I figure out who I am without you." Her breath hitched. For the first time, I saw true, unadulterated fear in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't waiting for her to fix this, that I was done. I didn't wait for a response. I turned, opened my car door, and slid into the driver's seat. As I started the engine, I saw her in the rearview mirror, standing frozen in the parking lot, watching me go. For a fleeting moment, guilt tried to creep in. But I pressed my foot on the gas, and I didn't look back. I drove for hours without a destination. Mile after mile of open road, the hum of the engine filling the silence where Clara's voice used to be. It wasn't just heartbreak I was processing now. It was the years of being blind, of convincing myself that my effort and devotion could make up for the absence of passion from her side. I had lived in a fantasy, and now that it had crumbled, I had to find myself outside of its ruins. Somewhere along the drive, I pulled into a gas station on the edge of a small town. It was the kind of place that felt stuck in time. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff limbs. Inside, as I grabbed a bottle of water, an older man near the back, maybe in his late 50s, caught my eye. He had weathered hands and a thoughtful frown. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine with a flicker of recognition. Not of me, but of my situation. "You look like you've been driving a long time," he said, his voice rough with age. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be." He leaned on a counter. "That's the thing about leaving," he said, a small, knowing smile on his lips. "You don't always know where you're going, but sometimes that's the best part." His words settled over me, heavier than I expected. I paid for my things and stepped back outside, his voice echoing in my head. I had been so focused on what I had lost that I hadn't even considered what I might gain. For the first time in years, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to be the man who came home on time, who asked if Clara needed anything before thinking about himself. For the first time in years, I was free. The thought was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past Clara's unread messages without a second thought. Instead, I opened my contacts and hovered over a name I hadn't called in far too long. Caleb, my brother. Life had gotten in the way: work, marriage, distance. But if there was anyone who would understand, it was him. I took a deep breath and hit call. It rang twice before he picked up. "Silas?" His voice was groggy. "Man, it's been a while. Everything okay?" I hesitated, the silence stretching. Then finally I exhaled, a ragged breath of surrender and relief. "No," I admitted, "but I think I'm finally ready to figure out what okay looks like." I didn't spill everything, but I told him enough. He just listened, without judgment. When I was done, he said the words that became my lifeline. You know, you don't have to figure this all out alone. Come stay with me for a while. For the first time since I had walked out of that house, I said yes to something that wasn't tied to my past. The drive to his place took a few more hours. By the time I arrived, the sun was dipping below the horizon. Caleb was waiting outside, leaning against his truck. He didn't say anything at first, just looked me over, taking in the exhaustion written on my face. Then he nodded. Good to see you, man. Something in my chest loosened. He handed me a beer, and we sat out on the porch in comfortable silence, the cicadas humming in the twilight. The peace was profound. Do you regret it? He asked eventually. I took a slow sip, thinking, did I regret walking away from the life I had built? No, I said finally, the word tasting like truth. I regret not seeing it sooner. But leaving, no. I think it was the first thing I've done for myself in a long time. Caleb nodded. Good. And for the first time, I believed it. The future was a terrifying blank page, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like an open road. 2 months later, I stood in front of the apartment I had once shared with Clara, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. The key felt foreign in my hand. I was here to pick up the last of my things, a final severing of the cord. Caleb had convinced me it was time. As I unlocked the door, probably for the last time, I was struck by how alien the place felt. It was still my name on the lease, but it was no longer my home. The scent of sandalwood and cinnamon still lingered, but it no longer spelled comfort. It smelled like someone else's life. I moved through the rooms quickly, a polite intruder. I grabbed the few remaining items I wanted, some books, a few vinyl records, my dad's old watch. Everything else she could have. I didn't want the reminders. I was just zipping up the last box when I heard the front door open. I stiffened. Silas? Clara's voice called out. Your car's outside. I didn't expect. She stopped short when she saw me standing in the bedroom doorway. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, styled in a sharp, unfamiliar way. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize. It had only been 2 months, but she already looked like a stranger. The realization didn't hurt. It was merely an observation. Just came to get the last of my stuff, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She nodded, crossing her arms over her chest, a familiar defensive posture. I thought you might have sent Caleb, he offered, but I needed to do this myself. An awkward silence stretched between us. The old Silas would have rushed to fill it, desperate to ease any tension. The new Silas just let it be. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I filed the divorce papers, I said finally, breaking the silence on my own terms. My lawyer should have sent them to you by now. She swallowed, nodding again. I got them. Good. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder and moved to walk past her. As I did, she reached out, her fingers grazing my arm, a phantom touch from a past life. Silas, wait. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, the kind of voice that once could have undone me completely. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about what I said. I was wrong. I paused, turning to look at her. Really look at her. Once, those words would have been the key to unlock my forgiveness, the foundation upon which I would have tried to rebuild everything. It doesn't matter if you were wrong, Clara, I said quietly. What matters is that it was true. Oh, her eyes glistened. But what if I don't want it to be true anymore? What if I realize what I lost? I studied her face, the face I had once memorized, the face I had loved more than my own, and I felt nothing. No pain, no longing, no regret. The gaping wound that had torn me open 2 months ago had scarred over, leaving behind skin that was tougher, less sensitive to her touch. Then I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I was sorry for her confusion, for the mess she had made. But I'm not the same person I was 2 months ago. I'm not the man who would wait around for you to decide if you wanted him. I took a step back, creating a final, uncrossable space between us. I finally found my own path, Clara, and it doesn't lead back here. A single tear slipped down her cheek, tracing a path through her makeup. So, this is really it. I nodded, my gaze unwavering. This is really it. And, as I walked past her, out of the bedroom that was no longer ours, out of the apartment that was no longer home, I didn't feel the crushing weight I had expected. Instead, with each step toward the door, I felt lighter. Outside, the sun was shining, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp autumn air, And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. I climbed into my car, tossed my bag onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Clara in the rearview mirror, a small figure standing at the window, watching me go. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. This time, I didn't slow down. This time, I didn't look back.